Young Dad podcast. I'm your host, Jay, and whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, or maybe, just maybe, you finally got a moment to sit back, relax, and put your favorite podcast on the TV in the living room, wherever you're at. Thanks for being here, and of course, thanks for tuning in. Today, we're talking about parenting, resilience, and how to truly meet your child where they are, especially in the world of autism. My guest today, Jennifer Celeste Briggs, is an autism activist, parent, and author of Watching Sarah Rise. She turned hope into action when she developed the Sarah Rise program, an innovative, play-based approach to supporting her autistic daughter's growth. Jennifer's story is one of love, patience, and breaking away from conventional norms to create a thriving world for her child. So, with that, make sure you grab your juice box, grab a snack, and let's jump into the conversation and welcome Jennifer to the show. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I love your line about grabbing a juice box. There's something so cozy about that.
True, true. And then for adults, there's we do adult juice boxes, whether that's an energy drink or a beverage of choice. So whatever your juice box looks like, it's totally on you. It just depends on the day. But no, it's great to have you, Jennifer. Your journey as a parent has been deeply personal and trans. First and foremost, let's kind of go to the story before the book and whatnot. How old? I'm guessing Sarah's your daughter, correct?
Hmm.
And
Yes.
then she has autism. When
Yes.
when was she diagnosed with autism? And then how did that kind of change things? Like, what was the like first reaction to the autism diagnosis and everything?
Well, we didn't get a diagnosis until she was maybe 4.5. And that was after I had decided to go to the Autism Treatment Center of America to learn how to run a sunrise program for her, which I called Sarah Rise. We knew, though, very early on that she was different from her peers. Around 6 months, we could tell, her peers were reaching for toys, rolling over. She was not. And so then we started doing lots of tests, seeing lots of doctors, trying to figure out what is going on. And we did learn that she has a genetic difference, and that results in autism and global delays and just needing extra help and support. And that diagnosis we got when she was 1, which I don't share because I don't want people to hear, oh, Sarah has whatever it is, and then think, oh, well, then the program won't work for my kid, because the Sunrise program can work and can help for kids with all sorts of situations, and even has been used with adults maybe who have never spoken before, and sometimes they do.
Very cool. So what kind of was the reaction to it at first? Like you already had kind of known, you already were aware of it pretty early on, but when it was like official and then you knew about it, was there anything like going through your head, or even when she was 1, like what was going through your head, kind of knowing that she's different and has this genetic mutation, I guess it would be called. What was kind of going through your head? And what were you thinking? Like what's next? Was there any fear, any worry, any of those kind of emotions as well?
Yeah, there was a lot of fear in the beginning, not just around the diagnosis, but it was really hard to get her to eat enough. So she was diagnosed as failure to thrive, that she wasn't gaining weight as fast as the doctors wanted. So I felt like I was doing everything I could to get her to eat, worrying, is she going to live? Is she going to be okay? I realize in hindsight, the doctors would not have let her get to the point where we were worried about that. But they were saying, okay, you've got another month to get her to gain weight, and then we have to talk about a feeding tube. So and I really didn't want a feeding tube, because to me that somehow symbolized things being even worse than I thought they were. I loved her, I delighted in her, and it was so stressful, and I felt so responsible. And when we got the diagnosis at age 1, I felt like I was in a black hole, just like spinning into such dark feelings, and also being like, wait, how is this happening to me? This was not my life plan. This happens to other people. I'm sorry. What is happening now? Um, but we were also really in survival mode and it was mostly me at home with Sarah, but it was my husband also. Just how do we get her the therapies she needs? How do we get her to eat enough? Is she going to learn to walk? Is she going to learn to crawl? Is she going to learn to feed herself or use the toilet? All of those were big questions and unknowns. by the time she was 4, she actually was eating. It wasn't a healthy diet, but she was eating well enough. We didn't need the feeding tube. She was walking. She started walking around age 3. And we thought, okay, well, maybe now we're not quite in survival mode. It wasn't feeling quite so desperate for me. But she still wasn't talking. And she also seemed like maybe her eye contact and connection was diminishing. I had already heard about the Sunrise program when I was in college. I had read a book by Barry Neil Kaufman called Sunrise about his son Ron and how transformational it was when they met him where he was and didn't stop his repetitive behaviors and worked with him one on one and had volunteers working with him. And he transformed so much. He went from not being able to interact with his world comfortably to being quite comfortable and going to a mainstream school and talking up a storm. So I'd heard about that, but I didn't think that I could do it for Sarah. I wasn't sure if it was right. But at age 4, she still wasn't talking. I thought, okay, it's time. So I went up to Massachusetts to the Autism Treatment Center of America, and I did their week-long training in how to run a Sunrise program. And that felt like giving me hope and a path. And it was a little overwhelming, like, oh, this is going to be a really big thing to run a program and work with her one-on-one and find volunteers and set up a room. And at the same time, I felt so empowered and hopeful of like, oh, maybe this will really help her learn to connect better and talk. And I did that. And as soon as I came home and started interacting with her differently, her language did start coming. And it was after that that we got the autism diagnosis. And actually, I kind of was happy about that. I was like, well, great. I'm already doing the thing that I know or believe is best to do to help someone with autism. So I'm set.
Can you explain a little bit about what a Sunrise program is, and kind of what the ideas behind it are, what the approach is, if there's any evidence-based practices included in that as well?
Yeah. So the idea is to follow your child's lead and not stop the repetitive behaviors that are called isms or stims. A lot of therapies do try to stop those, thinking that that's in the way of getting the kid to do whatever it is you want them to do. The Sunrise program is an approach that is saying, no, that's your doorway in. That is the bridge to connecting with them. And from there, you can help them towards any goal that you have. So at the Autism Treatment Center of America, they teach parents, or it could be a specialist, but it's most often parents, how to run a program for their child in a way that makes sense for their family. So it could be just lifestyle and changing how you think about your child a little bit, how you interact with them. Or it could be you make a designated playroom so you're getting rid of distractions. You know, a lot of classrooms and kids' rooms have tons of stuff on the walls, tons of toys all around. For the Sunrise program, you do not want all those distractions because you want the grown-up who's in the room to be the most interesting thing in there. And toys go up high, so the kid has to ask in some way. That could be pointing, it could be making a sound, but some sort of communication connecting to the adult. And then the adult is going to be super accommodating and user friendly and ready to grab whatever toy the kid has expressed interest in. And then ideally, you're in there for a 2-hour session. Sometimes I did 3 hours, sometimes shorter if I only had a little bit, and just focusing completely on the child, or it could be an adult, and you're following their lead. So Sarah liked to open and close lids. I would sit sometimes for half an hour, sitting near her, opening and closing a lid, not saying anything until she looked at me. And then I knew she was ready. And then I could go towards working on language or just celebrating that she looked at me. And then maybe we'd go back to opening and closing our lids. We spent hours playing pretty quietly in that way. But whenever she was ready to connect, I was there. So my presence in the room was like a constant invitation, but I was never forcing it. And so parents who decide to run Sunrise programs set up their rooms in this non-distracting way. They can train volunteers if they want a certain number of hours, but they don't have to. I did find volunteers and I trained them, and that was incredible because I can't think of everything myself. I don't come up with all the fun games and play ideas. And my imagination can go in certain directions, but maybe won't go in others. And so to have this handful of volunteers and everyone's coming with their ideas, then Sarah got this exposure to so many different ways of playing, so many different people who loved her. It was just the most beautiful thing. And her language took off as soon as I started asking for language differently, like within a few minutes, basically, of my changing how I was interacting with her. And then, especially as we started getting hours and hours a day of one on one, her language was just, it was like a snowball in the cartoons where it's picking up animals as it's going down and getting bigger. It felt like that. Just every day, I was telling my husband that she said new words to the point where it almost was like, why am I telling him? Of course she said new words today. But that was amazing when you think that she'd been almost completely nonverbal aside from making sounds, but not stringing them together until about age 4.5.
That's really cool. And so it sounds like it's a play-based like therapy model. But then
Yes.
the room is set up in a very specific way to make the child like communicate in some way because they have to somehow ask for what essentially they want to do. So whether that's, pointing to a jar or pointing at a toy or asking for a toy or something, and then you pretty much just play until they give you a cue to like look and to like then interact kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's creating a setup that is not putting any pressure on them, but is offering someone who is present and attentive and loving and following their lead. So if Sarah wanted to play with Candyland, but didn't want to play like the way of taking turns and doing cards and everything. She just wanted to like press on the board with her fingers. Well, then I would press on the board with my fingers so that everything I did was communicating that I loved her and accepted her and was delighted with what she was doing and celebrating whatever she was attempting to do and building towards like, oh, well, if we start pressing on the game, maybe I could show her the cards and show her the little people and start talking to her if she is occasionally looking at me or seeming comfortable with my input, then I can keep telling her about the game.
Okay. I like it. That's interesting. How does this approach differ from like conventional like ABA therapy, which is probably the most common type of therapy for children with autism and families working with their autistic child? Um, and how did this one work so well, like more or better for Sarah versus like an ABA approach?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that ABA is the most widely known and used. It's paid by insurance, and and then you can have therapists coming to your house to do it. I think with that, it probably matters a lot who you have as the therapist and how they mesh with the child and how flexible they are. For Sarah, we never pursued ABA therapy, the approach of sort of giving a reward for a certain behavior. Um, we certainly tried that, like the traditional potty training method of like, oh, hey, if you use the potty, then you get this thing that you want. That actually backfired and it didn't work at all. So for Sarah, I think ABA is just not the way. She really responded to our celebrations. And so you certainly could say, oh, well, that's a reward in a way, but it's a reward of connecting with a person as opposed to getting a jelly bean because you peed on the potty. Um, I think my impression is that with some ABA style approaches, that they are stopping the stim, whereas the Sunrise program is not stopping the stim. It's respecting it and giving it as much time and space as you need. And I can imagine with schools or an insurance paid therapy, they don't feel like they have the time to spend an hour opening and closing a lid, like a box, before you get to connect. So the advantage of the Sunrise program is you're saying, you know what? We're just going to surround this person with a lot of time. And maybe not all parents have that, certainly. And I do want to emphasize that I saw a difference with just a few minutes of changing how I was around her. But I also then did have the time to spend 2 to 4 hours a day with her, just me. That meant I had to volunteer with my younger child, or that I had other volunteers in with Sarah. So every day she got anywhere from 30 minutes to 8 hours a day of one on one attention, really following her lead. And I think what makes that possible is having the volunteers and that they are saying, hey, I want to show up and I want to give you my time. So you're not needing to bill insurance for all of these hours.
Makes sense. I think that's the biggest thing too is, with like an ABA approach, it's a limited amount of time, and it's really focused on getting the skill built, and then focus on getting some reps with that skill in, and then really focused on changing the behavior, and then really working on like through the behavior as well. Um, but then I think one big thing here, which I think is common between your approach, the Sunrise approach, and then also the ABA approach as well, is that it's a lot of working with the parent and the parental approach to things. Um, because not always is a parent going to understand, how to interact with someone with autism, especially a child. Because I think a lot of parents who may have a child with autism, I really don't think the apple falls too far from the tree in most instances. You can see it kind of in yourself, and you know how to deal with it. And so you're kind of just taking parents can often take an approach to where it's like, oh well, this is what I do, so this is what my kid should be doing, kind of thing. Or I live with it, they can live with it. Or I got by, they can get by, kind of thing. But the different ways people are impacted are completely different. And I think that's what's so important is finding the right approach to use with your child can make all the difference. 'Cause like you mentioned a couple times now, right? Like you saw a difference when you started approaching her different and interacting with her different. That's when you saw a difference come almost, within minutes of trying something new in a way that met her needs better. And I think that's what a lot of parents end up missing, is that they want it to be done in their way, on their frame, on their schedule and whatnot. Um, but the kid just doesn't line up with that timeline.
Yeah, I think the main or one of the main things I got from the training was how to read Sarah's signals of when is she available to connect, when is she not. And once it was explained, it was kind of so obvious. But the very idea that if she was not ready to connect, that I should just wait, that was a novel idea. It was like, oh, right, I don't have to push because it's going to be really hard if she's not ready to connect. But if she is ready, well, then full steam ahead. And then, oh, I'm just going to be really sensitive to noticing her changes and when is she open, when is she not. And that made a huge difference. But also, the Sunrise program really celebrates the knowledge that parents do have, saying, hey, you are with your kid all the time. You know your kid better than anyone and what motivates them and what they love. And you have the love to give them and to pour into that connection.
Yeah, no, 100%, and that's so important to pour in, and you mentioned a lot of this is having the time to do it right. Like you got to have the right amount of time to do this, and I think that's a big part here. So going back to like the volunteers thing, how did you find the volunteers? How did you like decide on them? How did you train them?
All different places. When I started, and I was thinking, like, okay, I've got my binder from my training. How am I going to do this? I just sent out an email to friends, family, people I knew in Pittsburgh, and then also people who were outside of Pittsburgh, figuring, well, you never know who knows somebody. So I just wrote an email saying, hey, here's what we're going to do with Sarah. Here's an adorable picture of Sarah to get you interested. Here is a little information about the Sunrise program and how Ron changed, that he was the original Sunrise son, but just affirming that we don't know if Sarah's going to change at all, but it doesn't impact how much we love her. We want to try this thing and it'll be great. And if you want to volunteer, you can be with Sarah and I'll train you. If you want to volunteer to be with Amy, my youngest, then that would be helpful because then I can be in the room with Sarah. If you want to come bring me dinner, then I'm not having to focus on that for the family for the evening. And all of those things would be helpful. So I sent that out and I got people responding right away, offering all of those things. So I had friends who had young kids coming to be with Amy so they could be watching their kid and Amy at the same time. Or sometimes they didn't have kids. It was also just people thinking, okay, I've got a couple hours to spend. I'll come hang out with your youngest. And then I had a bunch of people offering to be with Sarah. My neighbor happened to know someone who had some experience with working with autistic people and said, oh, maybe she'd be interested in babysitting. And I thought, hey, maybe she'd be interested in volunteering. So I reached out to her and she was. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher. And so I reached out to my friends in that community and I had some volunteers there. And then I also asked some of my friends who worked at colleges and universities in the area to send my email to their drama students because I thought, well, I want someone who is comfortable being silly and being flexible and in the moment, maybe improvising, and maybe a drama student would work. I don't know how many emails went out as the forward from my request. Could have been 10, 20, 30. I don't know. I got one response. But that one response came from someone who then he started coming 3 times a week, spending 2 hours with Amy, 2 hours with Sarah. So he was coming so often, we paid him as a volunteer. Whereas other people, it was truly fully volunteer. And then he told all his friends about what he was doing because he loved it. And then his friends started contacting me. So it just kind of grew through word of mouth. And when I started the program, I also started writing a weekly email just to my parents and some of my best friends saying, hey, here's what we're doing. Sarah said this word this week, or this is what I noticed, and just being really excited to share what was happening. One of my friends started reading those emails to one of her friends. And then that friend called me up and said, hey, I want to volunteer. So it just really kept growing and growing to the point where towards the end, I actually was turning people away because I didn't have time. Sarah did not have time in her schedule to accommodate all the people that wanted to spend time with her.
That's such a cool feeling, to get to that point. Um, that's really cool. It's cool how things grow, and then really all it takes is just people talking about it, right? Like one person like
Yes.
coming and doing it, and then going from there. I mean, it's crazy how it works, but that's how it works, and then it just takes one person, and then one person can really make a big difference and a big change, and it just kind of waterfall or not waterfalls, but like snowballs
Yeah.
from there,
Yes,
and
exactly.
that's really cool.
Yes.
And so at first, when people started coming or volunteering or showing up, was there any like hesitancy? Was there any worry? Was there any nerves? Was there anything that just kind of was like, oh, I don't know? Or had you, or along the way at all with Sarah, I guess, did you also like, were there any volunteers that you were like, I don't know if I want you to come back at all, kind of thing?
It actually seemed to work out pretty well that sometimes people would come to meet her and talk to me and figure out would this work for them. And then, sometimes they would realize like, this isn't really for me or it doesn't work with my schedule. But we just had lovely people overall. And some people had higher levels of energy and some people had lower. And that was a really good learning process for me to be like, oh, it's okay that we're all different. We don't all have to be hamming it up and be huge. And Sarah responds well to the variation and the variety. And so that was me learning to be more flexible. As we were trying to teach her to be flexible, I had to learn to be flexible. But mainly it was just almost overwhelming to take in the amount of love that people were bringing into our house. Like, wait, you really want to spend your time coming here every week and doing this? But yes, they did. And we would have meetings of all the volunteers like once every month or two so that we would all be on the same page and talking about, okay, what are our goals? How can we support each other? I would talk to each volunteer, like I would observe them as part of the training. I would start them with 10 minutes a day of going in to play with Sarah, maybe after they watched me play with her for 10 minutes. Then we'd talk. Then I'd send them in for maybe like 10 or 15 minutes. Then we'd talk again. The next time they would come, they would do half-hour sessions, and I would observe and give feedback again until they were up and running for 2 hours at a time, coming 1 or 2 times a week or three. And I would always observe the volunteers for at least 15 minutes of their time through a camera setup so that I was not in the room with them, but I could observe remotely and give them feedback saying, hey, when Sarah did whatever it was she did, the way you responded was really great. Here would be another idea you could do if it happens again. And then they could ask me questions also. So there was constant interaction and feedback, plus the monthly meetings when we could share with each other. And I continued writing the emails. And so as I got volunteers, they were added to the email list. So they were reading about what the other volunteers did and how Sarah was progressing. So that really kept us a cohesive team.
Interesting. That's really cool. Um, it's cool what a bunch of people can do when you all come together. When we all come together and we all have a common goal and a common thing we're working towards, and we're all just trying to help and give. Um, it's really cool what that can do. There's a lot of power to that community. There's a lot of power to that like kind of that setup and that part of our human nature that we're exploring when we do things like that. So it's really cool overall.
Yes, yes. And it meant so much the volunteers, which always surprised me. As I was saying, it was hard to take in the love that they were bringing, but it really impacted their lives too. So the last part of my book is just little excerpts of the volunteers writing in and saying how meaningful it was in their lives to be part of the program. And a lot of them are still in our life today.
Yeah, that was gonna be my kind of what I want to say next too. Is like how have these people been like integrated into your support system now and continue that relationship with you, with Sarah, with your family, like since like post the program that you had for her. Also, how
Yes,
many years of a
I
program did you
believe
do for her, for Sarah?
it was about 5 years. And at
Wow.
first, it was just like really part time. Of I got back from the training, I was starting interacting with her differently, but I didn't have any volunteers. We were in the process of moving to a new house. I had my younger kid, so it was really just changing my lifestyle a little bit then. Then we moved to a new house. I found some helpers. My sister in law helped us move into the house. And so then she would hang out with Amy while I was in the room with Sarah, and then we would trade. Then I started getting other volunteers because my sister in law lived across the country. She went back. Um, but after about a year of Sarah Rise, I realized I want to do this really full time. I want to not have Sarah attend kindergarten because she had been just going to preschool when I started. And kindergarten would have been full time. And I thought, well, I think she's progressing more at home. So we invited my sister in law to come be my full time helper. And she moved across the country and did that. And that really allowed me to get a lot of time with Sarah and helped, even with all the volunteers, it's still just a lot, with two kids. And we did the GAPS diet, which is a protocol for healing a leaky gut, where you make all of your food from scratch. And I was really glad to have a helper for that because it was a lot of food prep and a lot of dishes and just so much to keep track of. Anyway, so my sister-in-law is clearly still part of things. And we were really full time when she was there, like probably 6 to 8 hours most days of time in the Sarah Vise room. And then we started having Sarah go to a preschool, a different preschool, where I could go with her or my sister in law could go with her to be her helper. And it was just a couple hours a day, 3 days a week to kind of get a little social experience outside of the room, but then still go home, have Sarah Rise time. Then she did half day kindergarten at that same location and would come home and do Sarah Rise time. So it was kind of an ever changing amount of how much is she getting in the room, which volunteers do we have, because a lot of them were students, and so then they would be moving on to whatever was happening in their lives. But then a lot of them are still in our life now. I don't know if you can see behind me, there's a poster, there's a band called Bandits on the Run. And Adrian Ensko was that one volunteer of the drama department who wrote back and was interested and told all his friends. And he is in a band called Bandits on the Run. And they are one of our favorite bands. They come through and visit every time they're in Pittsburgh. And for Sarah's 18th birthday, we had them come to Pittsburgh and did a concert. And she got up on stage with them with her little guitar and played and sang the whole time. And it was incredible. So to have that connection from someone that she met when she was like 5, and then now she's 18, and there's still such a special connection. It's just so heartwarming isn't quite right. It's like heart melting, heart expanding.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And just it's cool how those connections just live on, right? They just continue on, they keep going, and they just never stop. And people just remember, it just shows like the impact that not only did they have on Sarah, but also like vice versa as well, right? Like how that sticks with him. And, he probably just didn't think anything of it. He's probably just thought at the time, like being a kid, I remember when I was 18 or 19 and stuff, and being like, oh, why not? That sounds like kind of fun, something to do. But then seeing what it turned into, like lifelong for him, that probably changed so many things for him. And just, really helped his overall development. And probably a lot of the, like, if there was other young men that were doing it as well, like helping, interacting with her, probably helped their development. Same for like the young women as well, that just really, really help them develop and learn, and to give them such a unique experience that they probably still look back on. They're still very, very fond of. I can only imagine. But you mentioned that Gap diet. I hadn't heard of that before. What made you guys decide to do that Gap diet, to do that versus just like traditional foods and things like that?
Yeah, so the GAPS diet stands for Gut and Psychology Syndrome diet. And I learned from other Sunrise families that they were doing that for their kids. And sometimes it was really helpful in terms of behaviors. Because if you have a leaky gut, then you're not absorbing the nutrition that you want, and there may be irritation. Sometimes it would help people realize that their kid was gluten intolerant or couldn't do dairy or anything like that. So you really strip it down to the first stage is just chicken broth and chicken soup, and that's it. And then you gradually start adding things in, and that helps you notice, oh, are there allergies or intolerances that you didn't know were there? For Sarah, we did not notice any instant behavioral change of like, oh, she must have been, not liking lima beans or whatever it was. Actually, she loved lima beans. I made lima bean hummus, and that was a win for the whole family, um, which I did not expect. um, and then because it's a protocol to heal a leaky gut, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily staying on it forever.
Mm,
But when Sarah was really little and we were working so hard to get her to eat, I would give her all sorts of things that by most measures would not be considered healthy, except that they were high calorie. I gave her butter straight, oil straight, ice cream anytime she would eat it, like anytime, because I was so desperate for her to have calories. And doing the GAPS diet was basically an overhaul of saying, hey, maybe this will help if she has a leaky gut, or at the very least, it got us all eating healthier. It got me really learning to cook and be creative, because at the beginning, you don't do any grain. It is grain free entirely, even if you're at the full GAPS level of like as many things as possible. So I ground up freeze dried peas to make a flour and mushed them with some egg and water and made like a pizza crust, which most people would not recognize it as a pizza crust, but Sarah's very flexible with her creativity in that way. So when I said we're having pea crust pizza with tomato sauce and shredded carrots instead of cheese, she was like, all right, sounds good. And she ate it. And we all did, and it was delicious. So I think we did it with the hope and the thought, well, maybe this will make a big difference. And she'd also been dealing with chronic constipation. She had
mm,
hypotonia as a baby. She probably still does in her muscles that you can't see, um, which means low muscle tone. And that can impact how your digestive muscles are working. And so she had been on Miralax or other things, and we thought maybe we can get her off of that. It turns out it wasn't quite as simple a fix. But I'm still forever grateful that we did it, because now she eats healthily. She does eat a pretty regular diet. We need to avoid dairy primarily. She can have trace amounts, but we can just go out to eat, and I can just buy stuff at a grocery store. And I do buy pre-made things, so I'm not making everything from scratch anymore. But now she eats vegetables and fruit easily. Whereas when she was really little and I was pushing the ice cream, it would be like, well, I'm tracking your calories, and only if we get a certain number of calories will I allow you to have fruit or vegetables, because those are so low calorie.
Yeah.
In hindsight, maybe not the best plan, but in survival mode, that is what I
Yeah,
did.
you were doing what you had to do at the same time, which is what you got to do. It's really cool though, because you think of typically for autistic children and getting them to eat and eat like especially healthy foods, things that have like a crunch or a different texture, things like that can be so hard. Can be so hard. Because they have like
Yes.
they have their own five food groups, which is one item in each of those five food groups. And that's all they'll eat for like their entire lives because those are like their safe foods. They won't try anything new. Um, so they'll be on a diet of Uncrustables and things like that because those are the things that like they can eat. Like, well, not that they only can eat, but those are the only things that they're comfortable with. So, trying to reintroduce food to them or get them to introduce new food to them is a battle, and most parents just won't take on that battle because there's enough other things going on, right? It's like, well, let's just leave them with whatever they have to eat. But I mean, at the same time, like, yes, it's calorie dense, but it may not be healthy. Like fruits and vegetables, those are really important for like the average kid to be eating, for growth. And if they can drink milk, milk is really important. If they can have grain and things like that, those things are also really important. Hence why they're all in the five food groups, to make sure they're getting. So it can be such a battle, um, to get your child to eat, and so that's a battle in itself.
Yeah, in the early days when it was so stressful and so hard, I used to daydream that we would get to a point where we could look back and laugh about those days because they were so far behind us. And I feel like, wow, we are at that point. We've been at that point for a long time. So,
Yeah,
whatever struggle we still have now in whatever area, I keep reminding myself, hey, this can change too. We could look back on this and laugh in 5 years, 10 years, and think, remember when this was so hard and now it's not?
yeah. It's just one of those moments. It's some of those moments, right, where you're just like sitting at a Applebee's and you're able to order, chicken fingers and enjoy them without thinking, oh my gosh, she's not gonna poop for 3 days if she does this or anything like that. It's just now you can just go and you can actually enjoy it and you can talk and everyone can communicate and it's just a good time, right? It's just a good time. Um,
That's
so
right.
I guess when you were going through all this, like, and like learning about it, were there any like other like parents or people who had children with autism that were trying to um tell you about what like trying to should on you, like, "You should be doing this, you should be doing this, you should be doing this." Were there any of those, like, "Oh, you guys."
I think most of those voices were coming from inside my own head. And most of the pressure was coming from myself feeling like, oh, gosh, we are not on the typical path. And I must do everything I can to get us back on the typical path, as if that was ever a thing that we could have been on, which it wasn't. It's just what I thought was going to happen. But I really felt so much responsibility and thought, oh, if I work hard enough, if I do enough of the therapies, then she will somehow transform and no one will ever know that we had this difficulty. So that was a long, good journey to start letting go of that. And actually, as I accepted her more as she was and our path of, what our life was going to be like more, then I became much more effective at working with her and helping her. And then she was starting to grow and change more than she had been. Because when I was at home feeling really guilty and stressed, I was not as good at connecting with her or helping her because I was just so stressed and so anxious.
Gotcha. And that makes sense. That makes sense, because your attention's in other places, and you feel all that pressure as a mom, and you have all these thoughts, and, did it eh, were some of those also coming from raising, like, Amy at the same time? I mean, I'm guessing is Amy impacted by autism at all, or your younger daughter, or is she pretty neurotypical?
She is neurotypical and she is the most amazing sister I could have ever designed. If you could have said, like, do you want to design a perfect sister for Sarah? I would be like, oh, well, let's do Amy.
That's
I feel like
awesome.
we got really lucky in that. And I think she probably benefited from all the volunteers that were
Oh,
coming into the house because our
yeah,
house was
she got a
just
ton
so
of
full
one-on-one.
of love. She
Yeah.
got a ton of one
She
on
got a
one,
ton
exactly,
too. She got
more
a
than
ton
she
with
would
you,
have.
with the volunteers, with other kids that were coming. Like, yeah, no, she benefited hardcore from it. And I'm sure there were maybe, but like as you're raising Amy and then you see Sarah going through this path, you're like, man, where did I go right here? Where did I go wrong here? Like, were there any of those like thoughts as well? And how did like you, and we haven't really talked about much about your husband and all this, but how did you guys like get through all those like, I don't want to say like dark thoughts, but those like negative thought patterns, like of like, oh man, well Amy's doing good, but then we got Sarah, and was there was there any comparison or those thoughts, or you know what I mean, those negative thought patterns?
I do know what you mean. I think most of the negative thought patterns and really intense struggles were before Amy was born, because it was only when Sarah was um, really sort of rounding the bend out of the survival mode of like, okay, she's walking, she's communicating, even if she's not talking. She could sign, she could point to pictures on a food board so that she could tell us what she wanted. Um, it was at that point that we thought, yeah, we can have another child. And I think, if anything, having Sarah be how she was and need so much extra input helped me be a much more relaxed mother to Amy. And I don't know if Amy had been born first, would I have been like really worried about when she was going to make her milestones? As it was, I was like, oh, Amy's fine. Whatever. She's totally like, she's going to learn to use the potty. She's going to learn to read. Like, I don't have to worry about this. Like, she is doing great.
Yeah.
And I think without Sarah, I probably would have been a much more worried, hovery, stressed mom around Amy and her development. And instead, it was just like, oh, I don't have to worry. We're in good shape. She's doing great.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's more of that we got through the harder, we had the hardest one first, and now this one we know there's nothing, I don't want to say wrong, but there's no expected hiccups on the path, right? There's no expected speed bumps along this
Exactly.
one. So this one should be pretty quote unquote normal, uh, normal path of progression here and whatnot. So that's cool. I was gonna ask too, like what what were those like conversations like? Was there any like uncertainty? Like, man, should we have another one? Are we sure? Because this Sarah's already like a lot, and she needs a lot of time and a lot of attention. Are we like fit for it? Are we up for it? How are we gonna do it? Like when like those conversations you guys were having, like what was kind of going through your head? Because I think a lot of families who have a child with that's impacted, whether by autism or another developmental or intellectual disability or delay, I think there's a lot of hesitancy to have another child.
Yes. So when I was pregnant with Sarah, I did not do any of the prenatal testing because I was like, it's not going to change anything. I don't need to know. Uh, when I was pregnant with Amy, it was like, we need to do the testing. I need to know if there is something coming down the road. um, and we had always kind of talked about having two because my husband is one of two. I grew up as an only child, although now I have stepsisters and I'm a brother, but my time like sort of in the house was as an only child. So for a long time I thought, oh, I'll just have one kid. But then meeting my husband and was one of two, I was like, sure, we can have two. Then in the very early years with Sarah, it was like, oh, no, 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 we're just the one, that is plenty. But again, as she was sort of becoming more able to do things and it was a little less stressful, then we thought actually having a second child could be a gift, not just to us, but to Sarah as well. And not that we want Amy to feel like it is her responsibility to take care of Sarah as she's older, but it doesn't hurt to have someone else in the world that really loves Sarah and would care about her
Hmm.
and look out for her.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I'm thinking here. I know our conversation's focused on Sarah, but was like for you guys like having Amy and then going through like Amy's like developmental years, like those early years, like was that like at all healing for you guys, or did it bring you guys kind of like a sigh of any like relief or closure to like some of those like things you may have felt when Sarah was going through the same years?
I think probably because as new parents with Sarah, it, it was hard not to take some of it personally as our responsibility or, oh, what did we not do? And then to realize, oh, nope, it's just some kids come by learning to crawl easily, and some of them need a lot of help. and some of them learn to use the toilet easily, and some of them need a lot of help. And just realizing it wasn't all what I was doing or not doing. Certainly with Sarah, what I did do made a big impact, but
Hmm.
I didn't continue to beat myself up quite as much about, oh, if only I had done more in the earlier years, or was it something I did when I was pregnant? No, it wasn't. It was just who they were meant to be.
So I guess, kind of shifting gears to wrap up the conversation here. Um, what what role did your husband play in everything? How did he end up? I mean, it sounds like he was the one that was out of the home a lot, working and doing a lot of those things, as dads do. But what kind of role did he play? How did he find his role? How did he end up connecting with Sarah, with Amy, while working, while supporting you? Like what kind of things did he do that like really helped you and Sarah and Amy and the volunteers and just the whole home like run more smoothly, efficiently, and the best it could.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, he's just a loving, creative, kind, calm person. And so sometimes one parent in a family will want to run a sunrise program and the other parent won't. And so, firstly, the fact that Carl, my husband, was on board with it is huge. And all our family was actually. As far out as you want to look at extended family, everyone was supportive. And that does not always happen for families. So I feel very lucky. Um, and then having the financial stability to be like, oh, we want a climbing apparatus in our living room. Sure, let's get that so that we can keep working on Sarah's strength at home and not needing to do all the PT going outside of the house. Um, and then you were right, it was primarily me at home coordinating the volunteers. I did leave a few times a week to go see massage therapy clients or Alexander Technique students, but that was pretty flexible, and I could do that when there were two volunteers at home. Carl would do his time with Sarah on the weekends, or like sort of just the lifestyle of how he interacted with her when he would come home and be around the dinner table. He could be playing with her, interacting, asking her about her day. And then he was really good at giving her plenty of time to answer, which we learned early on. We need to count to 20 or 30 after we ask her a question, count in our head silently to give her that time to answer. Um, Carl is really great at building things, so he would build things with her, sometimes like teaching her how to use a hammer and nails, or out building a goodnight moon house out of Legos. He would also do Thursday evening time with her when I would see an evening client and we had someone else to be with Amy. He would do Sarah Vi's time then.
Very cool. So he just made it work. As dads do, they make it work and they find kind of where they can fit in and where the things that they can contribute, right? Because I mean, every single relationship, both people bring things to the table and both people have that time and that ability to contribute, at different levels and different things in different ways, right? That's what I always say on the podcast here, right? Like moms can do so much, dads can do so much, and there's so many things that mom can do that dad can't do, but there's also a lot of things that dads can do that moms just can't do. As well, they can do it, but they just can't do them as well. You know what I mean? Like there's some things that a dad can do
Absolutely.
that a mom can do, but we just can't do them as well. We don't just do them as good. Like it's just not as natural for us. It's just not as impactful. And both things are true at the same time. And it's just important to have that. And I guess the only other question I have here, and then we'll wrap up, is how did you guys like help each other cope? How did you guys help each other take care of yourselves? Because I mean, I'm sure this with this, the volunteers, the constant running around, like you're still seeing clients, you're still, advising. Dude, we didn't even get into what the Alexander thing you mentioned is. We didn't get into that at all. I am curious, but we'll save that for sake of time. But how did you guys support each other? Just like to cope through all this, like mentally to avoid like the burnout, the fighting, um, and everything like that. Because it does happen in many of these situations where the parents just they're not supporting each other or they're trying to support each other, but then that leads to just the burnout and ultimately a split and divided household. So how did you guys like stay together? How did you guys work through it? Help each other cope, help each other take care of themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think one of Carl's great strengths is being able to witness the storm of other people's emotions, mine, Sarah's, Amy's, and not get reactive and defensive, but just be there and listen. And I am also really good at that a lot of the time with Sarah and Amy, but not always. And in part, that might be because I'm around it more, but I also think that I can get more triggered. And then Sarah and I can kind of be exploding at each other. Sometimes our periods are exactly in sync, and boy, is that a time. Um, but so I think Carl and I both share the idea that people have emotions and you don't necessarily need to solve their problem. You just need to be there and give them love and space and listen to their emotions. And then they come through on the other side and can figure out their problem and be sparkly and return to their, their best self. And so we'd been practicing that basically from the beginning of our relationship, mainly it being me with emotions. And I had said very early on, like, hey, sometimes I'm just going to need to have a big cry. And you don't have to fix the problem, but you can just listen. And he really heard that and took that to heart. And that's how we live our life. And sometimes I needed times to sit on the kitchen floor and cry. And sometimes then it would be the girls coming over and climbing on me and hugging me. Or sometimes they needed to have a big cry and I could sit with them if I had the space to do that. And then I also found support for myself as a parent. The Autism Treatment Center of America offers consultations so that you can say, hey, here's what's going on with my kid, or it can be, here's what's going on with me, and I'm really struggling. And then they can help you look at what are you believing about yourself or your kid that is maybe weighing you down and getting in your way. And maybe you don't even truly believe it. It's just somehow in your cells and you didn't realize you're operating like believing, maybe if I'm going around thinking I'm a terrible parent because we're dealing with the situation. And what if, oh, just because Sarah can't get a puzzle piece in, that doesn't actually mean I'm a bad parent. Um, and then another way that I kept my head above water was realizing I helped to talk to my mom every day. Just as someone who was loving, ready to listen, I could be griping about inconsequential things like something at the grocery store or talking about my deepest, darkest fears and feelings, whatever it was. So having that helped me not then dump everything on Carl when he got home at the end of the day. Um, but mainly, I think we get along and work really well together as a team. And then having all the volunteers also took the pressure off because before that, I would really desperately want Carl to be home at a certain time at the end of his workday. And if he was late because of a meeting, then I would be upset. With all the volunteers, then it was like, well, this is more okay. I'm not so drained at the end of the day that I desperately need him. I can be a little more flexible here.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, Jennifer, you guys have had an incredible journey, an incredible experience with Sarah, and just going through this, walking with her through her life, to this point. It's really powerful, and this was an inspiring conversation in its totality. For the listeners that want to read your book and follow your work, they can connect with you. They can buy Sarah Rise or buy Watching Sarah Rise on Amazon, which will be in the show notes. And then they can also follow you at Jennifer. I want to say your website as was it jennifercbriggs.com, or is there a different site now?
My website is watchingsarahrise.com.
WatchingSarahRise.com. Okay. I don't know why I had it different here, but WatchingSarahRise.com. And that's where they can get books, socials, things like that, and everything, and learn more. Cool. Great.
Yes.
Well, Jennifer, again, thank you for your time today. It's been fantastic. To all of our listeners, if this episode resonated with you, gave you new insights, or helped you feel seen as a parent, make sure to share it with someone who needs to hear it as well. And until next time, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected for more heartfelt, real conversations. And of course, until next time, keep leading your family with patience, love, and curiosity.